Hello. This is where
Wow.
we need music.
Hey,
We talk about this every
Every
single
time.
time. And I
Every
think it's
time.
time, speaking of AI, that we utilize AI to make a custom last call threat and tell song, opening
If
song,
there was
ending song.
ever a use case for AI, I think you nailed it right there.
Have you used the
Well,
AI song makers before? They're
I
hilarious.
have. It's awesome. Like
And
it turned me, well, not me, but it turned somebody into an R&B artist, rapping about security.
I was gonna say, wait, wasn't there another song you had showed me? The
No, we're not talking
MDR?
about that one. No, that's definitely deep in the
I
pockets.
have scrubbed the internet of the evidence of this. Someone
We don't
on
want
here, I'm
anybody to find that
sure, is gonna
whatsoever.
ask.
Well, hey everyone, welcome back again as we get going here. Why don't you drop in the chat where you're joining us from? I'm joining from Waterloo, Canada today, just in time for Canada's match against Switzerland to get going here. Anyone here from Switzerland? No? Great, go Canada. Let's go.
you're supposed to give them time, man.
You saw right through that, Shiv. There we go. We have some New York. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, there we go.
All right,
Miami.
Miami. Right
Roost,
on.
Roost Flow Mac. How is
Uh,
Roost going?
it's going great. We did our automation 0-day response workshop for 4 hours, but who's doing yesterday, and it went fantastic. And the scenario we used is actually one of the topics today that we had them walk through. It was very, you know, it was, I mean, I'll bit more when we get onto that particular subject, but I was alarmed when I was asking questions in the room and they're raising hands, but they were raising hands for the parts I didn't want them to raise hands for. I was like, "Ooh, this is scary." So very apropos, but it was great. Nashville's fun as always. Can't go wrong.
One of my favorite cities, Nashville. You can't go wrong there. It's so much fun.
Petawawa. Where's
Petawawa. Come
Petawawa?
on, that's a very Canadian name. I know Petawawa. Victor, how we doing
You
for
do? It
Petawawa?
sounds
Go Canada.
Canadian. Uh, okay.
There you go. He's doing well. All right. Well, hey, let's get going here as we have a few folks joining. And again, if you've just come in, drop in the chat where you're joining us from today. Bonus points if you have something in your cup that you want to share. The way that we structure this is it's Last Call Threat and Tell, a monthly series that Mac and I, and often, which we'll get into, a special guest will join us, but just a couple of security folks in a virtual pub talking about some of the latest security and cyber threats that we're seeing from our SIOPS researchers. And, anytime you've got a question throughout today, feel free, drop it in the chat. I know last time we had an incredibly lively Q&A that was actually difficult to keep up with. So let's see if we can top that from last time and outdo them and last month's attendees as a bit of a bonus point. But if you're new here, here's what you can expect. So you're not going to see any formal slides from Mac, myself, or Shiv. We're going to keep the focus on real practical intelligence and give you some actionable insights and advice into what we're seeing in the wild and what you can do as security practitioners, as business owners. Maybe you manage a number of clients as a managed service provider, what you can do to protect those environments a bit more thoroughly. But before we get into it, let me introduce, and we'll introduce our guest in a second. But my co-bartender, Mac Brown, Nashville, get a little air guitar going on for Nashville.
You'll make fun of me, but I did buy this hat at a bodega last night, so I'm ready to look like every bachelorette apparently in Nashville when you walk
Did it come
around.
with a set of
Yeah.
boots as well?
No, no, it was a sketchy bodega, I'm not gonna lie. So I they did not sell boots. It was this or the American flag one, so it feels very good. Nashville's great. Root is great. It's a good conference. It's good to be around a bunch of not just MSPs, but like technicians and engineers, network engineers, talking about all the fun things that we talk about today.
Yeah, you had a
Keeps them
bit of
up
a
at night.
hands-on training session with some folks yesterday too, right?
I did. Yeah, we had a 0-day response automation workshop. That is like a mouthful, I realized, for 4 hours. And some of the things we'll talk about today were certainly in that workshop as topics. I did a full threat intel recap and got them in the mind of I'm going to tell you what going on, whether it was Blue Hammer or Sonic Wall VPN exploitation or the Striker breach. I mentioned all these little recaps, and I was like, first thing that comes to mind for 0 day response that you would respond to as it relates. So it has been fascinating to hear them speak up. It was 90 people, so it was a lot of people in
Wow.
the room. Yes, I'm
That's great.
tired.
It's good to get a lot of practitioners and hands-on, use cases in the room too. That's great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're all in the trenches together.
Love it. We're all in the trenches. Today we're in the bar together. Will we be discussing the AI security for the back end? Oh, this is excellent. So we've got a very
Oh,
interesting first
nice.
question here. Let's talk about this. Is a great segue. So what is on tap today? We're going to build on last month's response to the Yelp for threat actors the activity that we did from last time. So stay tuned for a little bit more about that. But we're going to be doing something similar as our giveaway for today. Think security awareness training, but the instructor is a threat actor. So that's the context I'll give you for
So like
right
wrong
now.
answers only
Long
style.
answers only.
So
More to
that
come on that.
everyone's that is in here is automatically going to be like, chew into potentially better odds of winning today.
Exactly. And then we've also got a special guest in the bar who we'll introduce in just a second, but a real live security practitioner who's going to be giving us some insight into how organizations are managing AI models, governance, rollout, all of those good things. Kind of related to Axel's question there about AI security for the backend, but we'll get into
Mhm.
that and your specific question, Axel, in a moment as well. From there, things are going to get slightly more chaotic, so to speak. We're going to talk about security disclosures in the AI era. And our favorite example of this is chaotic Eclipse to look at. And then we're going to dive a little bit deeper on one of the recent FortiBleed threats and examine how stolen credentials can be a silent gateway into your organization and what that means. And then we're going to leave off with a spotlight on a threat actor that we usually do, and that's Team PCP. They popped up again. They're up to their old tricks, and now they're doing contests, which is interesting. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But finally, like always, we'll send you back to your like in your Uber with tangible things that you can do to tighten up your own security and your own defenses today. But without further ado, I want to introduce our special guest of the day, Shiv Tata, Director of InfoSec here at Cynet Security. Shiv, say hi.
Hey everyone, nice to be here.
Awesome. I love that background. Shiv, what's happening in the world? Tell me a little bit about what you do here at Cynet.
All right. Yeah, I'm the Director of Information Security here at Cynet. I work really closely with all of the panel here on a day-to-day basis, and mostly my role involves everything internal security within Cynet. So we are a security company, but believe it or not, we also have to do security internally, and that's where I come in. Yeah, everything from internal people security all the way to internal infrastructure security to our data security and all the good stuff. That all falls under my purview. Yeah.
Excellent. And we're great. We're really excited to have you as a guest at the bar today. You pulled up a seat, you've got your bar stool, got your popcorn in hand and your chips in hand. I know you've ordered your first drink there. Something that we really we really wanted to get into, we wanted to cover with you, and it's on the screen here. It's that rapid adoption of AI models. We talked a little about it in the preamble here before we kind of went live in the webinar, but what does that mean for organizations? So we've looked at Fable, Mythos, and how quickly those new models have been not only released to the public but also pulled back. What's been, your experience as a security and IT practitioner with launches like this?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to give some background to those who probably don't know about what Fable or Mythos is. But yeah, generally, Fable was the Mythos class model. Mythos was this exclusive security model developed by Anthropic, and within this project called Project Glasswing, where they invited like a very few select top companies across the globe who contributed to the research of this program and had very exclusive access to these so-called cyber models, right? and they were very secretive about this. And then they said that this is going to make or break cybersecurity. And eventually, they released a public version, general availability of this model called Fable 5, which was briefly, I would say, available to everybody for a full 48 hours. Within which, by the time we were collectively making a decision as a company whether or not we should use these models, it got rescinded, right? And reasons being number one which we internally were debating and discussing was around the data uh, uh, policy which they had. They were trying to retain all data, regardless of whether or not you have any zero data retention policies with Anthropic or AWS or however you use these models, and try to retain and store that data with Anthropic, right? And it's at their discretion what they do with that data, and they're not and they are entitled to keep it for as long as they want, and do whatever it is they want to do. So for a smaller company like us, it's really a challenging situation, because one, we want to really use what this model has to offer and see how we can benefit. But at the same time, we don't want to give out our proprietary data or lose that edge against a bigger player like Anthropic, right? And we were also not offered any auditing capabilities as to see, what it is they are going to do with our data, right? So that was like my big issue with Anthropic. And pretty soon we saw articles within 24 hours from bigger players like Microsoft and other
Yeah.
companies out there who also had a similar stance where they did not want their employees to use these models. And yeah, so by the time we collectively made that decision, it was pulled out because the US government also agreed. And
They're like, wait a minute. The government's like, we like taking data, but we don't want to give you back our data. This is very specific.
Yeah.
It's like when you
exactly.
scroll to the bottom of the terms of agreement and you just kind of scroll really fast and accept it and move on with life. Anthropic was hoping that people would just do that.
And then they come knocking
Exactly.
at your door looking for your left arm because it was in the agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah, if only it was like a click through agreement on your Apple iPhone, I would have done that, right? I wouldn't have read. But
Yeah.
yeah. So that was the situation with Fable and Mythos in general. As we all know, it's very exclusive.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like the trend which all these big companies out there, AI players, are taking out there. Like, for example, OpenAI's 5.5 Cyber model is also very exclusive. So they are not giving access to everybody to those models, citing security reasons. We don't know what the capabilities of these models are to the fullest of extent. We can only, rely on whatever public information we get from the so-called research, closed research. But yeah, uh, from my perspective, or at least from Cynet's perspective, for us, we require zero data retention. Especially, we work in a very we work with a lot of customer telemetry data, security telemetry data, which is sensitive, and our customers trust us for that. And we don't want those that kind of data to be, in the wrong hands ever.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Well, and I
The-
mean, what's your position too on the so-called guardrails that were supposed to be wrapped around Faye?
Well, the whole point was like we wanted to test that out, right? And we never really had access to the model. At least in my private usage of the model, it did not let me do any cybersecurity related work. I kept getting blocked, and every time I kept getting blocked, I tried to jailbreak it using different methods, but none of it worked. I mean, maybe I'm not good enough, but yeah, I guess. That was so the whole point was like, hey, we want to try this out, and if you're an enterprise willing to give up your data, then you have to be very picky about what kind of data you're going to expose to these models. Even so, I read a few articles wherein customers were still facing blockers, where they couldn't use or the model to the fullest of its capabilities, right? Sure, you could use it to run a scan on one of your repositories, or identify some low-hanging vulnerability, which is fine, which any modern AI capable tool will do. But in my experience, at least, we weren't really able to explore what those guardrails were, or even put the model to the fullest of its test and capabilities. All right.
So capability wise, it almost feels that capabilities, AI capabilities, are starting to outpace governance. Like more broadly, when you think about at the higher level, how you build out an AI governance plan to hold up regardless of what any single release brings, like how do you think about that as a practitioner, security practitioner? Some things that you put in place.
Yeah, I mean that's a very good question because I mean this better than anybody. We get dozens of these requests on a monthly basis,
Mostly
dozens
from
from
me.
yeah, from every department. It could be just a use case, a workflow. It could just be an internal use case, or it could be an MCP server, or it could be an agentic workflow, or like AI touching your source code. There are so many different use cases, right? So when we first started drafting the governance policy, we had to think about, what is it that we really care for?
Mhm.
Sure, we can go ahead and evaluate every use case individually, but that's going to eat up a lot of time. And then the traditional way of doing vendor security reviews, which took anywhere between 3 to 5 days by reviewing all the policies and procedures of the vendor, that goes out of the window, because
Yeah.
now you have new use cases, which may not be tied to a vendor at all, right? How do you then build the governance framework around it? So we essentially came up with a solution wherein one size fits all kind of a thing, right? Like we
Mhm.
were just trying to see where the data is going, right? The data flow analysis was the most important for me. I'm like, hey, what data goes in, what comes out, and where does it live? That's of utmost priority, right? You tell me, does it stay within our infrastructure, or does it leave and go to some external provider, right? If it is, then are they using it for model training?
Mhm.
If they are using it for model training, what kind of data are we giving it, and why do we need it to do model training, right? Or the other thing is, we have already approved an AI architecture, like for example, your AWS Bedrock plus Cursor plus Claude Code, right? If that is an approved architecture already, you are free to use it for whatever, right? So those are the kind of workflows we already pre-built with the help of our engineering folks, as well as our research teams here. And then after we understand where the data is and whether it lives within our infrastructure or exits our infrastructure, we were thinking about the access control around it, right? What kind of read access does it have? Does it also have write access? Why do we need write access? And then apply all your basic security controls around it, like the principle of least privilege, and then your authentication controls, like it has to be OAuth based, and then once all of that is there, then we did a architecture review of the whole thing, right? Not just what the policy says, but also review the end-to-end architecture to understand whatever our initial understanding of the use case was. Does that all fit in? Does that all apply even now? That way, we were able to minimize the data exposure, and also understand in large views, like if you pan out, like zoom out and go to a 10,000-foot level, I could see, okay, these are all the use cases and workflows which are within Cynet. These are all the use cases which are external to Cynet. And that's how we could easily determine who should have access to what, and what kind of data sensitivity, or like access controls, or any other extra controls we may need to apply to those particular use cases.
That's great. I think that covers a lot of the infrastructure, the back end, sort of question that Axel raised here as well, is that even
Yeah.
for security, a lot of what we see is obviously AI security for endpoint, for data loss prevention, et cetera. But that's what you raised there are really good, thoughts, I think, for everyone here to think about that is what data does it have access to? And even, in the context of agents that your folks are building, that your team might be building, it's where are my agents? So having the visibility into where they are, what do they have access to, and then what are the permissions that they have as well. And those are all really good, I think, back end things to think about with your AI infrastructure and your government's AI governance policies as well.
Right, 100%. And one of the most important thing, I think the new frontier was the MCP servers itself, and that became a new thing, wherein, this new protocol is the gold standard for connecting all your AI tools. So we have to think about how our databases, code repositories, observability platforms, and, our ticketing systems, how do they all have interact with these MCP servers, which all of these companies are spinning up, and how they connect to our approved infrastructure, which is whatever within AWS or whatever other platform we have. So that architecture, that layer was important for us to build. And we essentially built a framework around it. There is a very freely available good guidance around this by OWASP. So OWASP has an MCP security cheat sheet. So anybody over here who is interested in it, please have a look at that. So we then essentially followed the guidance to the T, right? Like we essentially built our own AI directory where only the all the approved use cases of the MCP servers, they live in that directory, and then we were able to manage access control to those that particular Git repository, and then it became our single source of truth for all approved MCP servers. Again, all that which I said before about where the data goes,
Right.
how it goes, the flow, that applies to MCP servers as well, right? So uh, yeah, so that's pretty much how we are doing.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think, and thanks for that, because I think that's really great practical things that as a practitioner yourself, that you're able to share with the rest of the team here too. I'm going to save the advice you have for your peers for when we get into the defensive playbook a little longer, because I want to shift gears into still keeping on that theme of AI, but a more chaotic theme, as it were, in that chaotic Eclipse disclosures in the AI era. We've talked about VS Code in the past and those tokens and that token theft especially, and how we've seen 0 days, and how there's been researchers that have published the responsible disclosures when AI starts to accelerate this. So I think generally, like genuinely, every developer in your client base would probably sit up when they see this, right? It's that AI is changing not just how fast exploits are being found, but how fast they go public. So, Mac, I know we've covered this in the past, but what are your thoughts on the chaotic Eclipse disclosures and what we've kind of seen from that perspective as well in the real world?
I think it's really apropos with everything we're talking about right now. There's a whole theme to every topic today that kind of fits in the same bucket. This started as like this is a pretty big shift in the researcher community, I would say. Of course, we're on the disclosure side. And to be devil's advocate a little bit also for the vendors is if you think about, we're going to talk about, knock on wood, Fortinet again. We're going to talk about
Mhm.
Microsoft. We're talking about massive companies that are going to be high likely targets and also the most valuable if you're going to go fishing. Don't buy a rainbow. You're not going to go fish for a rainbow trout. You're going to go look for a marlin, right? So the exploit targeting is going to target massive operating systems and exploits that are highly likely to be used, known exploited exploits and vulnerabilities by threat actors. But this is the shift in the research community getting, at least for person, we talked about them last week, but certainly frustrated with the fact that, there's silent patch cycles going out, but they're not getting observed or seriously in their disclosure. So we're going to see, not just the acceleration that AI has had on vulnerability discovery, probably the recompiling of vulnerabilities, right? So that they can decompile patches that are coming out or advisories and basically build new flaws, new exploits related to it. Posting proof of concepts is extremely dangerous on GitHub, especially when you're going outside of a normal disclosure process that occurs. Um, Yeah, and I think that a lot of this shift too that we see this evolution with, especially with like the malicious NPM packages, the amount of supply chain breaches that are going on and the targeting of SaaS companies, software companies. We've talked about, we made a joke about this the other day. If someone's asking, do you use XYZ software? And we're like, nope, we unfortunately just build it in-house, but it's like we're too broke to build that right now. Like that requires a budget. And for once, budget tightening saved us. So I think people, all of this to me, when we talk about chain breaches, when we talk about nightmare or chaotic eclipse and the undefend, blue hammer, red sun, the target, which this isn't new news. However, I think that this shift is really going to make people just step back from a fundamental side and say it's not just SDLC, but it's like third party risk management now comes into play. So, like,
Absolutely.
how are we approaching our secure development or secure by design process? How are we approaching our vendor relationships and third party relationships, application security, and how we manage those? And of course, we're the reality that people are still lacking in other fundamentals like zero trust concepts anyways. It's awakened everybody. I think when we talk about the Glasswing and then Mythos, when we talk about Mythos and we talk about Fable and we talk about this, like all of the topics you and I have covered in the past few last calls are really just not shifting. They're kind of just getting a little bit more vodka has been added to, as my pun for the day, added to the fires. And so these fires are just getting a little bit bigger on the conversation of like where this is like actually, I hate to use the term, but this is actually disrupting the cyber industry in many ways.
Yeah, and I think like for MSPs too, right? You end up in situations like this where patches aren't keeping pace. You inherit that exposure window, right?
Oh, yeah.
You'll see a public POC that drops. It means your clients are now exposed the actual second that comes out, and you can't wait for a patch that might be days or weeks out, right? It's been disclosed. There's a proof of concept, so you need to think about that as well. Like Shiv, how are we thinking about that even from? I know we've done a lot of work, obviously, with responsible disclosure in our trust center. Like, have you seen similar things in terms of what we're thinking about process-wise to kind of keep Cynet safe?
I mean, from my perspective, I don't really want to change our risk management timelines just because there's enough AI, sorry, but slop out there.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of AI slop, especially in vulnerability disclosures lately, wherein it's become so easy to generate reports which look very authentic and professional. And from a threat researcher perspective, it might look, oh, this is top notch. This is like, world class report. But at the end of the day, the findings themselves, they are unproven. They don't have a POC. They
Glitchy.
don't exactly, so
Mhm.
or they're completely misrepresented, or they have they don't apply to the environment. But then we cannot dishonor these disclosures we get because we work in
Mhm.
security. We take everything with a grain of salt and we review everything thoroughly and dedicatedly, I would say. But then uh, yes, that doesn't mean we were going to change our risk management frameworks and timelines. We still follow the guidance, whatever the standards like NIST or other platforms out there provide us. And so far it's worked. And this again ties back to our previous conversation about
Mhm.
Fable or Mythos. Unless these models become more generally available for people to explore and really see what these tools are capable of, we will not have the need to change it unless it's a state sponsored attack. That's a
Right.
different case, right? uh,
I feel like it's good to be aware of some of the news topics that we're talking about, but we still go back to the fact that organizations are just missing the fundamentals. They're not doing like the basic things that even if these exploits did occur, you have the defense in depth, you have layer defenses,
yeah.
you have systems in place, you have monitoring and detection going on. Hypothetically, you should be able to patch and or if there's not a patch, examine the post exploitation behaviors, have a little more that like, hey, we're monitoring for these activities. We were targeted. All of these vulnerabilities that are coming out, that all of a sudden the drama around them dies down a little bit. We're like, well, we're not worried. If you're worried about it, then well, if you're worried about it, you probably haven't been working in security long enough. But
And it's such a good point about fundamentals. And I think like what's becoming increasingly more part of the fundamentals are your credentials, right? I think like ID credentials in general, identity is really that last frontier. And this is something that wasn't really an attack per se, but more of an exposure that led to a number of credentials being exposed across these Fortinet assets, right? So there was a data set that was exposed, working credentials for almost 75,000 internet-facing firewalls, FortiGate, SSL, VPN gateways across pretty much the entire world. And so it affected almost half of all Fortinet devices that were reachable by the internet.
that's
And
crazy.
right, isn't that like this is insane? But it was something that was really silent. Like it was even though it affected all these people and this type of technology and specifically FortiBleed equipment, it was something that was really, looking at how they could actually, hence the bleed, how they could basically like drain credentials, valid credentials without anyone knowing from an
Hmm.
organization, right? And
Well, and a
so,
new report came out this yesterday or days ago. SOC Radar, who's doing a lot of this investigation, released another campaign of a custom Forta sniffer named tool that is
mm,
sniffing. It's built off of a built-in tool that monitors, essentially intended to monitor traffic and sniff that packet traffic that's coming through to then harvest credentials. So it wasn't just the info stealers and the brute force seen over the years in those campaigns, but they're finding new things relative to this. I mean, Shiv monitoring internally pretty tightly right now because FortiGate in general has been top of the list as far as the top exped type of software Fridays, still today.
yeah,
And
like you've got something now that's pre-authenticated, right? It's got pre-authenticated access to the edge. There's no exploit that's required. They're literally logging in. There's no need to hack into the environment. They've
no.
got the device and that's something that you trust to keep people out, but you've actually handed the keys directly into the adversary, right? So
And this was the scenario we used for the shop was for to bleed. And
mm,
essentially it was like, hey, you show up on Monday. This news just came out. Your boss just sent you a team message. Like, what are we about this? You check HUD's tool lookup. You're like, oh, snap, our organization's actually impacted. What do you do? And then I was like, and of course you have 150 devices you have to handle in regards to this that are vulnerable and no MFA. And they were like, why are you making this the worst scenario in the world? But I mean, it goes back to like this is a prime example of like where assume breach mentality comes into play for your response and remediation efforts. You just have to do a full identity plane cleanup. I mean, these are
right.
exposed, they're secret, tokens, creds are out. You just have to assume that they're compromised. And frankly, if I was using these, I made everyone raise their hand, like how many people are using this? And probably half the room. So 90 people, like
Wow.
a good amount of people raised their hand.
Yeah.
And then I asked if they had checked for to bleed, but really only a handful of them raised like a handful raised their hand in regard to checking this. And I'm like, this is that threat intelligence mindset, folk. You got to see this news and just assume breach and do a full rotation, revocation of sessions, password resets for all your admins or move off of Fortitude, whatever your decision's going to be down the road. But
Right.
yeah, it was this is just a bigger wake up call, I think.
And what do you think, like, in terms of why managed service providers should care about something like this? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's always what we say with MSPs. It's a one-to-many impact. You are the keeper of those keys and that gateway. These are management interfaces and consoles, and they give you direct access. They're exposed to the edge. Like you're gonna get scanned, you're gonna get targeted, if not now leaked into this massive credential campaign, harvesting campaign. So I think for MSPs, it's like it comes down to taking the risk seriously even if you're not impacted, going and
Hmm.
saying like, we need talking about this, like, what does the future look like with certain vendor relationships? How are we protecting our customers? Like, how are we? One of the suggestions, actually, everyone went around. We probably had 10 teams, and they all had different nuances added to how they would respond to this internally, and hopefully they all go home next week and respond to it. Hopefully, they're fine to do it right now. But a few people were like saying how they may have conversations with their clients saying they don't want to have MFA. They're like, well, we're going to force it. They don't want to do certain things. We decided we're going to push out a drop the client. And I know that sounds aggressive, but I have had a lot of partners say like, we just have an expectation that if we're risking, if we're on the line because we're managing these types of critical systems, we're going to make sure we're doing everything to secure access to your environment and handling your environment too. Or else, let's not do business together.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to what you were talking about earlier of assume breach and assume that, your client's VPN front door could be sitting in this data set with live credentials, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the exposure. And so some of the things that you mentioned are rotate, obviously rotate every single FortiGate, credential that you've got, the SSL VPN credential, the enforcing MFA and on all your VPNs, get that management interfaces off the public internet as much as you can, all of those things. Because I think that's the biggest risk is if you don't know, assume breach in that case.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely have a playbook
Yeah.
ready to go because I don't think this is going to be the first time. It certainly hasn't been the first time we've seen something like this. It's not going to be the last time. So it's a matter of that 20-hour window before see something hit the news. It's been exploited for a week in advance prior to. So once they get environment, I mean, that's all they need. And I think with FortiBleed specifically, is it focuses on opportunities for initial access brokers. Now they can just commit to what they need to do to establish persistence and access in their targets, and then they'll do a nice little handoff to a ransomware affiliate group. Like they're just
Right.
more the merrier.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, keeping along those themes of, threat actor groups and also credentials, this is the spotlight again. Team PCP is in the spotlight yet again, but for kind of different reasons this time, although still nefarious. But this one was interesting because in this example, they were actually incentivizing and gamifying
Yeah.
attacks, right? Like
Yeah.
this
This is
one's
like
this
the
one's
third
nuts.
time. Just so you know, we love talking about Team PCP. I think
Probably
Mac
the
just likes to
third
say
last call that we've
PCP.
done.
Yeah, it sounds like a cops episode, but yeah, they're gamifying it. If you think about it, this is like I don't know if you compare it to guerrilla marketing or like a pyramid scheme where it's like, hey, what's the best way to get spread our malware out there and get things out is like we'll hold a friendly competition.
Contest.
Yeah. Very aligned with the World Cup right now anyways, or the playoffs anyway.
No score in Canada, Switzerland, by the way. But yeah, this
Sorry.
was interesting, right? Like they partnered in this case with Breach Forums, and it was complete with leaderboards and prizes, 1,000 Monero for the biggest open source package that would lead to a compromise, right? And it's that shy halud worm yet again that we also covered in previous last call threat intel webinars. But that was the tooling, right? It's the shy halud worm who could do the most damage. It's open source, right? Should do to dude. Like,
Shy
so they've
hallo
got that
dude.
deployed. But just incredible that this is now something where, and we've run the fun little contests of, hey, come up with, your security awareness training as a threat actor kind of thing that we'll talk about in a little bit and that sort of thing. But this is threat actors gamifying and trying to do the most damage that they can by incentivizing it, incentivizing the attack.
Oh yeah. And all it takes is one poisoned package, right? Like there are the conversations that MSPs need to be having. Not MSPs, this is everyone, right? I
Yeah.
think especially as Shiv kind of was talking about like the reality of vibing nowadays too, and the shift in how developers are developing, ironically is becoming more insecure because of these same emerging threats. And
Mhm.
so I think it just takes one malicious package to or dependency to now get pulled down into your pipeline and you wouldn't know any different.
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
this is like a way for them to get get their malware, get the worm out into the wild and just like accelerate its propagation. You flooded the ecosystem with a bunch of copycat, folks, and now there's a number of these executions, these attacks that are happening out there. So what are some ways, Mac, that you would say like, I mean, we've covered this in Shy Halud specifically, but like, how would you protect yourself against something like this? Because this is kind of a unique case where it's scaled, it's running wild, but there's still some general things that people could do to keep themselves safe.
I think having in general right now like a response plan. So like there's one thing of going back and auditing your actual pipeline, looking at your code base, looking at secrets and tokens, but it's having a response plan of like what to in the event you need to remediate something. Like anything that you're going to recover or patch or put fixes to flaws in, there may be like operational disruption. So depending on what you're actually applying it to. And I think as we see this rise in vibe coders, we're also seeing a shift in like organizations not really being conscious of. I love that Shiv went over all the recommendations of what you need to do internally before you just like totally open up the floodgates. But I think that AI has massive adoption to a level that you people don't have that visibility of what their devs are using, what their employees are using. And so that governance program, this is a prime actually example for how that governance program really needs to be done. Like it needs to be taught, it needs to be promoted. MPs need to understand, are their clients vibe coding or have they vibe
Mhm.
coded something that now could impact just again, one poison packet could impact many. And you have to then watch for behavior if there is exploitation, because now you're a part of a larger supply chain compromise point.
Yeah, exactly. In the theme of kind of defending against these types of threats, Shiv, I think what we're going to do in the defensive playbook here is kind of come back to you a little bit for what we were talking about earlier with regards to Fable. And what are some things that like you would share with security practitioners, your peers on like things they need to think about from either establishing AI governance or just what they should fundamentally consider in building out these programs as people are adopting more and more AI across organizations?
Yeah, I mean, I would actually, circle back to what Mac was just saying about, assume compromise. That's important in this context. I know I said, not many people fully understand the capabilities of these, including security practitioners don't fully understand the capabilities of these models, but we cannot take this lightly as such. Whatever reports you're getting from all these big players who have access to these models, we should just go with the assumption that we are already compromised, but that doesn't mean you are not going to not do your due diligence and have your basics in place, which is again goes back to your regular governance structure of having where data retention policies or like where the data is flowing, having your regular architecture flow of where the data is going, where it's staying, for how long it's staying, who has access to that data, the access controls around that. So those basics become really important again, right? And I think a lot of the companies, they are missing that picture when they spin up new infrastructure, especially with at a rapid pace using AI tools now. And that kind of governance layer of monitoring uh, that framework across all this new infrastructure is missing. And if you can somehow automate all of that, then you're in good hands, right? But until you figure that out on how spin up new MCP infrastructure, or you spin up new AI agents, or you spin up I don't know, like internal models which are accessing some infrastructure somewhere on AWS, you really need to have that architecture in place before you can actually or look at it at a broader scale.
It's so important too on the data governance side. Like, I feel like we've talked about this for
Mhm.
a decade in this industry too. And it's whoever on the security team like pulls the short stick that has to do the data flow mapping and have to actually see what's going where and where it's stored and how it's protected, in transit, at rest, you name it. And so I don't think it matters if we're talking about something like Fable or we're talking about just a general DLP solution. People still aren't seeming to do it. They don't really have a grasp on where their data is. And you
Mhm.
introduce something like this, they're more focused on prompt injection risks than like
Yep.
what an insider threat could be doing, even at that point.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, from like a very, if I have to give anybody like five things which you have to look up, look after. I mean, if it's like a new vendor or like a new AI tool or a company you're assessing, then do your regular third party, review of that vendor. Don't go, hire a new AI company which has no vetting whatsoever, no SOC 2 report, no ISO report, whatever. Don't go hiring them because that person, or he's your friend, or he's your buddy who's just uh, joined this bandwagon of creating an AI SaaS tool, right? uh, do that regular posture is security posture, vetting, and then data flow analysis, access control, and then the architecture review. This will give you a holistic picture, and uh, don't just rubber stamp a vendor because they're well known, right? Or because they're somebody personally, uh, and always assume, compromise. That's one of the things I would say, a key takeaway from today's lesson.
It's definitely all assume breach, least
Yeah,
privilege, have a response, just clean, just revoke
Patch
everything
faster.
and reset all the
Assume
passwords at
breach.
this point. Yeah.
Rotate your keys. Like it's all pretty common. Yeah, I mean, and it's a really common thread. I think these are kind of like three really separate or very different incidents, but that for me is like the common thread. It's like assume breach, protect yourself, rotate those credentials, rotate those tokens, like make sure you're doing those types of things. But even Mac, like from your perspective, we obviously covered FortiBleed, we've covered TPCP and supply chain risk overall. It seems to be continually coming up and something we talk about here. But defensively, what would you leave the folks on the call here with the last two threats there? What they can do to kind of protect their orgs better or protect their clients better?
First and foremost, these are great topics. I was just saying this to the workshop room yesterday too, of like the reason why we're talking about these topics is because I like to think of them as like little mental mini tabletops that you bring back to your team when you're having your weekly meetings in the conference room. And it doesn't mean it's a security meeting. It can be with your C-suite, it can be with your engineering team, it can be with the security team, your system administrators, your network engineers, you name it. Like these are all very relative conversations to things that are pertinent to their role. So especially like on the team PCP and the supply chain, not everyone have a Shiv. I would also recommend if I could clone him and ship him out to everyone, I would, because we had to get creative when it came to auditing for malicious NPM packages, right? Doing that internal audit and examination, because this isn't going to change, right, Matt? I felt like there was three different topics just around between Shai Halud and Team PCP, and there was one
Mhm.
other, all related to these malicious packages that are disrupting, are being injected and poisoning your CI/CD pipeline, are being injected. And when you talk about like autonomous installs and updates, you're putting yourself more at risk. I know GitHub had released an article too of some of the changes they were making. So I think vendors are trying to step up because they see the rise in this. But what you can do, you can definitely like do an audit, examine your pipeline. As it says there, like scope OIDC based tokens and request polls, disable those install scripts, like just lock it down as much as possible if you don't have a lot of awareness. Or conversations you should have with your engineering development team. Be really weary of any outsourcing of development you're doing where you're not aware of like what tools are they using to vibe code if they are vibe coding or what they're using because they could inadvertently be basically putting you at risk. And more importantly, anything you're building and developing, and you start to realize that some of these are compromised, you have to remember that you have to fix those things. So, is it going to just have some more business or operational disruption? Are you going to lose data in the process? Or, unfortunately, like you may have to go if you're rotating tokens and keys because you saw access and compromise. Now you're doing a full IR. So, these are
Yeah.
just definitely conversations and audit. I would say the biggest recommendation outside of just doing those changes in settings and configuration is go and do an audit. Like just go and do it regularly and keep a pulse on it. And from FortiBleed, I mean, it goes back to assume breach, like go back to zero trust, like resetting all your credentials, killing and revoking active sessions, doing MFA, conditional access policies, like really bolstering up your identity protection. And then, I mean, even if it means like, hey, we had it on the roadmap to get PAM in or privileged access management in, these are really prime real day events. I'm not
Yeah.
saying like kick Fortinet out. I'm sure other people have already been considering that for a year when we keep the news, but at least look at how to enforce zero trust principles. This isn't a buzzword. They have a full list of things you can do. And I think having that really robust defense on the identity plane is going to be, it's going to be huge. Like that just has to be done. And I'm shocked at the amount of people that still don't have MFA. You know,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
don't have a phishing resistant based MFA. They still have no ability to, you know, reduce global admins. They aren't just making the steps to move forward.
Mhm.
Um, and so a FortiBleed is just another prime example of if your name is out there, you are compromised. If your creds aren't out, I would just assume breach too. I would go and make this a prime opportunity to, you know, it's out loud. It's like, let's be paranoid, put on your tinfoil hat, clock into work, and start everything. Like maybe you're piss off some admins, but personally, I think it's the reward versus the risk is far greater when you see the types of massive credential harvesting campaigns.
I suppose on one hand, if everyone was doing all of these things, then we wouldn't have much to talk about on webinars like
I know.
this,
We're
and
done for
we wouldn't
this.
have right. We wouldn't have much to publish in our monthly, cyber threat intelligence report. We wouldn't have any stories from our SOC to share. We wouldn't have any blog resources. But the fact that these things keep continuing to happen is because many times the fundamentals, the foundation isn't in place, and attackers are exploiting those things. And I think a lot of times where what we've seen in our monthly threat intelligence report. You can get some in-depth reports or in-depth insight into what's happening there. So definitely check that report out if you've not done it. I think Amy's going to share some links here, either currently or after the webinar, so you can get that. Our Stories from the SOC is a newsletter that you can reach as well. We'll publish that monthly with a number of updates that we're seeing from our own SOC, from our PsyOps team. And you can get that on LinkedIn as well. There's almost 10,000 subscribers. And the fact that the folks on here are going to go join that right now means that we're probably going to get over 10,000 very soon. And then the final thing is just check out some of the blog resources that we've published recently with FortiBleed. Obviously, we've got some articles around that. Blue Hammer is one that keeps coming up, and then obviously supply chain continues to be the attack that continues to be in focus. So we're always going to have stories around that. I feel
Yeah.
because it's definitely the area that folks are exploiting.
I'd recommend too, if Amy has time, the zero-day response we've put out. You'd be shocked when we were talking about it with all the technicians in the room, the MSPs in the room, the business decision makers. Some of them were like, huh, we actually don't know how to do exposure auditing. We don't have inventory of our internet exposed devices and perimeter devices. So every week, or not week, it feels like every week, every month, we're talking about this, Matt. And there are
Yeah,
these common themes across all of these topics. Having a playbook, go out and test it. Go back and talk about these real world events, even if it doesn't apply to you.
absolutely. To kind of leave us off here, we're going to do a fun little exercise that we talked about. We introduced just really briefly in the start of the webinar today, but as an activity, what we're going to do here is we've got two Amazon gift cards that going to give away for kind of the best responses. But what you're going to do is for this exercise, we'll take the next 5 minutes or so and give you a bit of time to think about your role as a security awareness training instructor, but you're an actual threat actor. So, what are some of the things, the best practices that you would give folks in that role? Here's a couple of examples. Just click accept on all MFA requests, especially if you get them when you're away from your workstation. It makes total sense, right? You
Yeah.
wouldn't want to lose any of that work that might require you to sign in later. So there's a lot of friction there in signing in. So just accept all the MFA requests that you get.
One
Um,
should always be sinking. Just don't let it stop.
That's a good one too. I like this one as well, as the best passwords are the ones that you can remember clearly, right? Like, so the easy thing to do is just write it on a sticky note and keep it close to your desk. just go ahead and do that. And drop your examples in the chat here so we can all see them. And the last thing is here's another good example is privacy filters make your screen so dark, right? It's hard to see with all those filters there. It's okay to remove them. Like go ahead and remove those. So drop in your best examples. The top examples here, creative examples are going to get a couple of Amazon gift cards and we'll go from there. So we'll give you folks a couple of seconds to kind of do that. In the meantime, I'm going to go through some of the questions, both ones that we got last threat intelligence webinar that we didn't have the chance to kind of, answer, and the ones that we kind of walked through today. So let's kind of go through the lightning round. I think everybody's got the exercise or the assignment here. So again, security awareness training. You're written by threat actors. Pretend you're a threat actor yourself. What kind of security awareness training guidance would you provide? So we'll leave you with that. But the Q&A lightning round here. So with AI as the future, is the impact of ransomware expected to grow, stay minimal, or stay the same? What are your thoughts on this, Mac?
I think of what we saw last year, the cartel model, the spin-off affiliates that are like constantly shifting. We're still seeing like the top threat actor groups operating. So like Akira, Kinlan, Gentleman Ransomware is doing really good. I don't know if it's gonna grow. I think it might grow a little bit, but honestly, these certain groups are doing quite well. Um, the same way they've been going. I think they're moving more towards the extortion only where gentleman ransomwares that group is a good example of that, of just basically contacting weeks after the attempted compromise or successful compromise, I guess at that point, just saying, hey, we have your data. We were able to breach your system. We have your data. I mean, that's what their notes look like. So I don't know
Hmm.
if ransomware is expected to grow. I think it's going to stay the same, but the
Hmm.
shift on just extorting on data X is going to grow.
Yeah,
Malware,
yeah.
less things that make noise, and then you have to sit there and wonder, wait, we don't know when they got in, we don't know how they got in, we know what data they took because they're going to threaten us to release it. Now we have a different type of a full investigation we have to do. So take out that decryption activity, you're a little bit more fearful.
That's a really good example. Like I'm thinking the same thing. I think especially as a share of other threats that are out there, like the entire threat landscape, I would say that I expect to kind of see it the same because you're going to see more of these new types of threats emerge that are going to expand the overall threat landscape. So as a
Hmm.
share, I would expect it to kind of stay the same because you're going to see new types of threats and new types of vulnerabilities come out. So yeah, I'm kind of in the same path as like the same line as you that. I don't see them diminishing overall, but actually as an overall attack category, the concentration specifically of ransomware to kind of stay the same. Yeah. Cool. Next question, again on the ransomware component or element of it is the industries question, which we get quite frequently is which industries are currently the biggest ransomware targets?
Well, it's always been manufacturing industrials for the past year.
Right.
And then you kind of go down this for technology, but I believe on the news TI reported it's now business services.
Right.
There's been some pretty massive breaches just in the past month alone, so that's probably why there's a shift in that. But also, like business services is vague, covers a lot, covers many things, and then manufacturing and tech. But I'd say that those have been the biggest targeted industries in the past, well, since beginning of 2025, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get into the last couple of questions here, we only have a few minutes left in today's session, but I see Axel submitted a funny little security awareness training thing there. So yeah, if you see a new USB thingy plugged in between your keyboard and the PC, it's okay. It's just radio and it's a radio interference filter. You can just leave
Oh,
that alone. It's no problem. I like that. That's good. Again, if you've got anything along the lines here of what Axel's put in the comments, we're going to select the top couple here and share a nice shiny Amazon gift card with everybody. Maybe one last question here before we kind of break for the day and the lights are starting to turn on and they're putting all of the chairs up again. I don't know, they do this around me every single time. But how is AI changing? We've covered a bit of this today, so maybe this is redundant, but how is AI changing both cyber attacks and cyber defense?
Well, I can speak to the cyber attacks for sure. It's a full accelerant. Again, vodka on the fire. Like that would absolutely be how AI is impacted. We traditionally saw it sort of coming in as far as creating infrastructure, legitimacy in phishing campaigns. We see a lot of that, but now the way that AI is being used to just discover vulnerabilities, but chain vulnerabilities together to create exploits, to do testing, to do decompiling of security software. I think that's where AI cyber attacks have really it's been changing the game. It's making their ability to perform their own operation in a more successful, concise, repeatable manner. So it's scaling business for threat actors, I suppose, in the opposite way that we would want. And then
Yeah.
Shiv Tata has some PTSD from the cyber defense side, as he's been describing for AI.
Yeah, like I said, from the defense side, it's pretty much mostly on the, governance side. We need to understand that governance enables speed, but it doesn't necessarily block an attack, right? So, as much as we try to enable our teams, we must make sure that they're configured properly, the scope is proper, the data which it accesses is proper, and that's secure. And then the use case specificity is like everything. You really want the use case to be crystal clear as to what and why we are using this AI tool for whatever it is. And that basically bolsters your defenses which are already existing, right? Like if you have the context towards all of that, then essentially the defense is also in place.
Hmm.
Excellent. Well, that's great insight, Shiv. As our special guest today, I want to thank you for joining our last call threat intelligence session today. It's been great to have your perspective on here, so thank you again.
Thank you for having
Everyone
me.
that hung around, and also I had a couple privately here, the security awareness training guidance. We're going to reach out to the winners. So thank you everyone who submitted something there. Those are quite funny. I'd love to publish those. I think it'd be a nice little take on security. But that's it for us for this month. Thank you again for tuning in to the Last Call Threat Intelligence monthly session. From myself and Mac and Shiv, everyone have a great day, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks
Bye,
all.
everyone.